this being Mother's Day, I would like for us to spend some time honoring mothers. But also, some Asian cultures are celebrating the Buddha's birthday right about now. In fact, I was invited to a Vietnamese Buddhist birthday celebration at a temple in Cocoa Beach this evening. But I won't be there. I'll be down in Orlando eating barbecue with my mom and my son. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the spiritual significance of the Buddha's birth, too, and how we might see Mother's Day as a reminder to honor our own mothers with our spiritual lives. So, how many mothers are here today? Good, number of them. How many of you have or had mothers at one time? So, I know I don't need to tell you how important motherhood is. Without our mothers, none of us would be here. They gave us life, and there's no better gift than that. I'm sure I've mentioned before that I went to Baptist churches when I was growing up, and I've probably heard hundreds of sermons in those churches. Most of them I can't remember anything about. But one year when I was 12 or 13, we went to Winters, Texas, which is a little town in West Texas, to visit my grandmother on Mother's Day. And this was a very small town, and it was not a big church, but it was kind of an old, well-established congregation. And the pastor asked all the mothers who were there if they would stand. And there were quite a few. And he wanted to know who the newest mother was and who the oldest mother was. And there were several generations of mothers there. My grandmother had some great-grandkids, and there were some other three-generation mothers. And one biggest family, and I think they had, the oldest mother there, had 4 generations of mothers present. And I don't remember anything else the pastor said that day, but it struck me as very, well, you know, I was 12 years old in a Baptist church. But I do remember thinking that it was very profound to see that connection from mother to mother to mother. In Buddhism, there's this idea that at some point all beings have been your mother. And this is a technique for cultivating love and compassion. There's a discourse about that called the Mata Sutta. Mata is a Pali word for mother. And in it, the Buddha points out that this life actually originated very, very long ago. In other words, my birth might have occurred in February some 60 years ago. But for that to happen, countless other conditions had to be in place first, including a long line of mothers. And in traditional Buddhist terms, considering the view of rebirth, this means that my existence comes after eons and eons of an unfathomable beginning. The Buddha said a beginning point is not evident, but being hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving, beings are constantly being reborn and wandering onward. Being who has not been your mother at one time in the past is not easy to find. So if you're angry at someone or planning to take advantage of them or something, the idea is that you can remind yourself, this was my mother once, and you'll feel more care and concern for them. Buddhists also recognize that motherhood is the model for loving kindness. In the Metta Sutta, the Buddha says, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. So when the Buddha gave this teaching to his monks about what state of mind to hold toward others, he knew that they would recognize a mother's love as being sort of the perfect, ultimate expression of kindness and compassion. So as I mentioned, this is what you might call Vesak season. Because of the different calendars used by Asian and Buddhist cultures, the actual date varies, but generally, sometime between late April and mid-May, most Buddhists celebrate something called Vesak Day, which is the Buddha's birthday, but also in some traditions is considered the time of his enlightenment and his passing. So President Obama actually sent out a Vesak Day message this year. And as far as I can figure out, this is the first Vesak Day message ever offered to Buddhists by an American president.
Wow.
So since we're acknowledging the Buddha's birth today as part of our service, I thought I would read you this message, which is dated April 29th, 2016. I send greetings to all those observing Vesak. Vesak is a special day for millions of Buddhists to honor the birth, enlightenment, and passing of the Buddha. At temples around the world, Buddhists use this time to engage in prayer and reflect on the virtues of wisdom, courage, and compassion. By taking part in these acts of humility, the men, women, and children who uphold the proud traditions of Buddhism contribute to the diversity of cultures and religions that define our common humanity. As you come together to mark this occasion, I wish you all the best. Signed, Barack Obama. So the people who sent that out actually suggested that Buddhist organizations send the White House news of how they maybe incorporated this into Buddhist birthday services. So I'll send this to the White House.
Yay!
Anyway, I like that the president included the phrase about reflecting on the virtues of wisdom, courage, and compassion at this time. As Thich Nhat Hanh pointed out in that famous Mother's Day message that I excerpted earlier, we learn about compassion from our mothers, and I believe that we also learn a lot about wisdom and courage from them. This is a difficult world, and to raise a child requires sacrifice and effort, and to take that on requires, I think, a lot of courage. No one's perfect, but if any of us managed to survive long enough to be here today, it's because our mothers had not only some courage, but made it a point to learn how to keep us fed, clothed, and sheltered. So I think it would be right to say that our mothers were our first Buddhas. The person that we call the Buddha, which means the awakened one, was born Siddhartha, and he was the son of a king, King Suddhodana, the king of the Sakya clan in northern India along the border of what's now Nepal. And Siddhartha's mother, Queen Maya, was actually the king's second wife. He had married her sister Pajapati first, but she was unable to conceive a child, so the king married her younger sister Maya. Well, one full moon night, while sleeping in the palace, Queen Maya had a vivid dream in which a white elephant appeared holding a white lotus flower in its trunk. And it circled her 3 times and then entered her womb through her right side. And this was a sign that she had conceived the son who would become the Buddha. Well, the gods were already celebrating this. They had begun rejoicing the moment of Siddhartha's conception. They knew that a special being was arising in the world after a long darkness of ignorance. So let me explain something before I go on. Someone who's going to become a Buddha is called a bodhisattva, a Buddha to be. So to become a Buddha, a bodhisattva has to protect a number of virtues, things like generosity and patience. And once those virtues are mastered, the bodhisattva lives as a deva, a kind of a deity or like an angel, in a certain heaven, awaiting for his final form. So to become a Buddha requires that one be born human, with this unique existence that includes both joy and suffering. So when conditions would become ripe on earth, the bodhisattva would pass away in heaven, enter his mother's womb to be reborn. So by the time the queen had dreamt of this elephant, the gods knew that the bodhisattva was on his way to earth. His cousin, Ananda, explained what happened next. When the bodhisattva passed away and descended into his mother's womb, a great immeasurable light surpassing the splendor of the gods appeared in the world with its gods, its maras, and its brahmas. 4 young deities came to guard him at the 4 quarters so that no humans or non-humans or anyone at all could harm the bodhisattva or his mother. Well, after her dream about the elephant, Queen Maya woke up. She knew that she had received an important message. She didn't even know what it was. But an elephant is a symbol of greatness in that part of the world, and so she knew that this was important. So she told the king about the dream the next morning. And King Suddhodana invited a number of wise men to come and consult with them and explain the dream. And they said he was very, very lucky that this dream explained that the gods had chosen the queen to be the mother of a very great being. So when the time came for birth, Maya went to the king and told him she was going to her parents' home. That was the custom in those days. A woman would go to her parents' home to give birth. And so the king made arrangements for her attendants and some soldiers to accompany her, and they she started toward her home in what's now Nepal. And as her procession passed a garden called Lumbini, they stopped to rest. And Maya actually got out of the palanquin that she was being carried in, and she went to reach up to pull a flower from a branch of a flowering sala tree. And she held onto the branch and gave birth while standing there, holding onto this branch. And immediately after birth, the legend says, the infant Bodhisattva took 7 steps in each of the 4 directions, with lotus blossoms springing up from his footsteps. And then he stopped and pointed at the heavens and proclaimed, in heaven above and on earth below, I am the honored one. I shall dispel the suffering that fills the world. So as soon as this had happened, the divine beings rejoiced, and the Naga king, which is a certain kind of serpent, came down with warm water to bathe the baby. So today, at Vesak celebrations, bathing the Buddha is a very central point of the religious service. And generally the way that works is there's a statue of the Buddha, and everyone lines up to dip a ladle full of this perfumed water. It's been perfumed with flower blossoms and incense, and then pour it over the Buddha as a sign of basically passing along the results of your good deeds back to their source. So it's one of my favorite rituals. I really like this symbolism of pouring this water over the shoulder of the Buddha. Well, unfortunately, Maya was not to see her son become the Buddha. After she returned to the palace, she became ill, and she died 7 days after his birth. So the infant Siddhartha was given to her sister, Prajapati, to raise. His stepmother again became the queen, and she cared for him as her own and clearly loved him very dearly. But you could easily conclude, I think, when you read the stories, that although he didn't remember his mother, her loss certainly affected his determination to set out to end suffering in war. There's another very short scripture where Ananda was his cousin, by the way, and his constant companion. He remembered everything he was told, so he was a very useful guy to have around. But Ananda had been meditating, and he went to see the Buddha, and he said, "It's astounding, sir, how short was your mother's life. 7 days after your birth, she died and reappeared among the contented devas." "That's the way it is, Ananda," the Buddha replied. "The mothers of bodhisattvas are short-lived." And then on realizing the significance of that, he said, "Those who have come to be, those who will be, all will go, leaving the body behind. The skillful person, realizing this, should live ardently the holy life." So Siddhartha was clearly aware of the sacrifice that his mother had made in bringing him to life, and he was very grateful to her. So after his enlightenment, he actually went to visit her in heaven. In Buddhist mythology, the Buddha travels several times to higher planes of existence to instruct deities in his teaching. And the most important of those visits took place in the Deva plane where his mother had been reborn. And during that particular trip, the Buddha spent 3 months in heaven instructing his mother in some fine points of Buddhist practice. So I'm going to take another little sidebar and explain something else. The Buddhist canon is huge. It's made up of a whole lot of books. And collectively, all these teachings are called the Tipitaka, which Pitaka means basket. So it's the 3 baskets. So the first basket contains the collected discourses given by the Buddha and key disciples and monks and nuns that were alive during his time and shortly after. So this is called the Sutta Pitaka. And most of the time, if I quote something, it's going to come from the Sutta Pitaka. The second basket contains all these rules for monastic life, how to run a monastery and all this kind of stuff. And this is called the Vinaya Pitaka. The third basket is the Abhidhamma Pitaka. And among other things, this contains several books of very detailed, complex explanations of very fine points of Buddhist philosophy and metaphysics and psychology. It's generally seen as commentaries and explanation of the other discourses, and probably was composed by some very advanced monks. However, the mythology holds that the Abhidhamma was given to the Buddha, or given by the Buddha, to his mother. So he went up to the heaven where Maya had been reborn and spent 3 months instructing her in this. But 10,000 deities from other realms also showed up to listen to the teaching. So the Abhidhamma was given to these celestial beings because the Buddha felt it was really important to say all of this stuff at once in one sitting. And a normal human being couldn't sit still and pay attention for 3 months. In fact, most of us can't sit still and pay attention for 20 minutes. So he decided to give this teaching in the heavens, but he was still a human being. So in order to accomplish this, he had to create another image of himself to keep preaching while he would go down to earth once a day and get a meal. And so one of his key disciples, Sariputta, would meet up with him, and while he ate lunch, he would give a short summary of the teaching to Sariputta. And so that's how the Abhidhamma got into this world. Anyway, by teaching his mother the most refined aspects of the Dharma, the Buddha was expressing his gratitude to her for having carried her in his womb and having brought him into this world. I'm not sure that my mom would sit still for 3 months while I talked to her. So I don't know that she would see that as an expression of gratitude or not. Probably not. Anyway, as for the stepmother who raised him, she eventually left the palace and became the first of the bhikkhunis, the order of nuns. And there's a beautiful poem attributed to her, which I want to share with you. It's the Buddha as seen by the woman who raised him, and then has since become enlightened as a result of his teachings. He said, Buddha, hero, praise be to you, you foremost among all beings. You who have released me from pain, and so many other beings too. All suffering has been understood. The source of craving has withered. Cessation has been touched by me on the Noble Eightfold Path. I've been mother and son before, and father, brother, grandmother too. Not understanding what was real, I flowed on without finding peace. But now I've seen the Blessed One. This is my last form. The flowing onward of birth has expired. There is no more rebirth now. See the gathering of followers, putting forth effort, self-controlled, always with strong resolution. This is how one should honor the Buddhas. Surely for the good of so many did Maya give birth to Siddhartha, who bursts asunder the mass of pain of those stricken by sickness and death. So like each of us, the Buddha was born a human being, same kind of body and mind that we have, the same potential for awakening. Through his own efforts, by doing the same kinds of things that you and I can do, he developed that potential. He didn't wait for somebody else to come along and enlighten him, for the heavens to open up and reveal the truth to him, or for something to magically manifest. He just used his body and mind to practice until he awoke. And we can do that too. Every child, every human has the capacity to awaken. To realize that potential begins by honoring the gift our mothers gave us. We can best honor her sacrifice by respecting the Buddha nature within ourselves, and by developing those virtues the President cited: wisdom, compassion, and courage. So there's one other thing I want to mention to you, and I just got this morning while I was getting ready to come up here. There's an organization called Kind Spring, and their mission, the organization's mission, is to kind of promote the practice of kindness. And so they sent out a Mother's Day thing today with a suggested practice. So I'm gonna leave you with this thing to practice. It's called Connect to a Mother's Spirit. Whether biological or chosen, youthful in spirit or wizened by experience, a mother's heart can unlock the natural nourishment that stems from unconditional love. In 80+ countries around the globe, today is a day to honor the maternal figures in our lives. Reflect on someone who reminds you of the word motherly love. Think of that person and do one thing today in her or his spirit. Whether preparing a hearty meal for someone else or being sure to eat a balanced diet yourself, whether offering your seat to someone or invisibly stepping in to fill a need, Sink into those small acts of selfless love, inspired by the presence of our nurturing mentors. So thank you for your attention, and have a happy Mother's Day.